I'd like to invite ADANIA Shibli, Maniza, Naqvi, and Aamer Hussein on stage.
Is this on? Yes. Well, it's my absolute pleasure to introduce ADANIA SHIBLI, whom I know from many cities in the world, including Berlin, where she stays part of the time, and from an absence in Ramallah, where I missed her by a week or two. I've known her for 15 years, since before she published her first novel in English translation. I think it was just published in Arabic. She's the author of 3 novels, various essays and articles. She's one of the few young Palestinian writers who's known on the world stage, and I think it's really interesting that a novelist should be known the way she is, because mostly Palestinian literature is connected with the names of great poets and great male poets in one. I think ADANIA is the best person to talk about her own work, which we're going to discuss with her, but I'm just delighted that she continues to write so beautifully, that her work is made available to us in English, that we often have to wait for it. And I'm sure she'll talk to us about many aspects of that work, of continuing to write in her mother tongue, Arabic, and feeling passionately about it, of being conversant with how many other languages? English, German, some Italian, yeah? Which means that you can also interfere with your translations when you want to. And she has been to India, so I'm really very glad that we managed to bring her here this time as well. She seems to be enjoying it very much, I think. Perhaps we'll begin with that, about your moment in Karachi.
Hello, marhaba. Actually, as a Palestinian, each time I'm being asked, where are you from? I say from Palestine. And people say, Pakistan. So I'm really finally here, in Pakistan, the real one. Yeah. It's, yesterday we were speaking actually about the general feeling here. I think people are very calm. I don't know if I have a wrong impression, but my sense that there's a calmness here that we lack in Palestine. It's even more calm than in Germany here. So I wonder what is this calm, but so far I'm really enjoying it, I think. And also being able to meet many writers, novelists and poets, which unfortunately we don't have a direct access to, especially in Arabic language or the Arab region. Often the sad case is, as always, the gaze is toward the West, and hardly there is a gaze toward the global South, where we can read each other, although the connections are many with colonized past, and even the effects of colonialism into our present. For me, it is an occasion to hear as well and to learn. And so far, it has been really inspiring.
Well, ADANIA, first of all, welcome to Karachi. We are all honored to have you here. And as you know, as you can tell from the claps, we are all in love with Palestine and the idea of Palestine, and we read the literature from Palestine. We are influenced by Edward Said, who has changed our view on how to narrate history, how to read history, how to analyze history, and to question who writes our stories. I read a short story of yours last night called An Impassive Ball, and I was astonished by what it left me feeling. I would encourage you all to read the story. It's called An Impassive Ball. And it's of children playing. They're playing outside like children should play. The only thing is that the field that they're playing in is not an ordinary field. Can you tell us a little bit more about that story?
I also should say, actually, that Pakistan is always sort of present in the Palestinian mind, because we have a joke. The difference between Palestine and Pakistan is 1 letter and 1 year. So between 1947 and 1948, there's always, but unfortunately, yes, we cannot read Pakistani literature or literature from Pakistan or by Pakistani writers, not only because there's not this look towards the global south, but generally books are banned in Palestine. For instance, my books are not available in Palestine. And this is an important thing one remembers in this case, that normally occupation colonialism doesn't work only with weapons, but it's a whole destruction of the culture, the cultural understanding of what stands behind you. I mean, I would say it is a destruction of a human being. And this is, I think, where the story that you're referring to, and this is a question we're always asking ourselves in Palestine: what remains after all of this destruction that we're being subjected to, socially, economically, and I'm talking socially, even, being in love with somebody is governed by which area you are from and how you can cross these zones. There's a division of zones A, B, C, and D. That it governs with whom you will fall in love. You will never be able to fall in love with somebody from Jerusalem when you are from Ramallah, although the distance is like 4 kilometers, because this love is destined to an impossibility. You cannot join together unless you lie, and you become a liar. So this is also a question for you. What are you as a human being? You are turned into a trickster, a liar, somebody who's constantly demanding. This is the presentation of a Palestinian. And I think this constantly brings us to questions. How do you deal with lying? How do you deal even with joy? And I think the story that you're referring to, it is a question that is always present, that after all of this destruction of you as a human being with values, what can you enjoy? And where's the joy? And it's fascinating, I think, sometimes for me when I see there are still so many possibilities that has not been destroyed. And I think this is where the spirit of resilience, and we call it in Palestine, I know it's a cliche to mention this word, it's sumud, but it has been a cliche that helps you. It's like a cliche of not of mundanity, but of a necessity. So you say, I'm being kind of steadfastness, or you still can play in a field that has been destroyed. And I actually, for me, this is always the question: what you still can do despite the destruction.
Can you tell us the Arabic words for resilience and steadfastness? I would like to hear them in your language, yeah.
Yeah, I just said it's sumud.
Sabur, yeah. We have that word
and
too.
And actually, you have half of the Palestinian population, the girls are called sumud. So it's like, yes, either Muhammad or sumud, or kifah, which is struggle, or jihad. So also, although you have also salam, like you have salam supermarket and whatever. So it is like a variations. And sometimes you think, okay, maybe we should work on the Palestinian imagination as well with names.
There's so much that you said, and it's triggered so much in my mind. The first time, and the only time actually, I went to Palestine. I had the privilege to go, but it was at a very difficult time. It was in 2002 when Jenin had been invaded and a part of it had been destroyed. And I went to Palestine in 2002, and it was also the time when the wall was it had just begun to be constructed. So what you just said, that you cannot even fall in love with somebody, somebody in Ramallah cannot fall in love with somebody in Jerusalem, but somebody in Ramallah cannot fall in love with somebody in Gaza or in Jericho or in Jenin because of the walls. And the idea that the words that you are using, even those are under lock and key. And Faiz Saab's line, Aaj Bazaar mein Pa Bajola chalo, that walk in the streets chained, but keep on walking.
In the marketplace.
That is exactly what you are talking, you and I were talking about the other night, that there are so many constraints, there are so many walls, yet a writer and a poet finds a way of continuing, and that is resistance. How do you navigate that space that is so constraining? Because you teach in Palestine. Can you speak to that? Do you need to do self-censorship?
No, you only can do censorship if the gun is on your head and you hear the click that the bullet is going to come. That's the only condition, I think, sometimes. And also, I think there's something very important about being cunning. We were also speaking about this trait, which is very important. It comes as a tool for those who are oppressed. Because you know you lack the power. And then you always think how you can outsmart the powerful. You don't have the weapons, you know your tools, what's available there. And I think this cunningness has been also a companion for Palestinians. It's not only steadfastness, not only sumud, but being cunning. How you can avoid these things and how to make even a possibility of love. I just want to mention this year of 2000. I mean, it was the second Intifada just started. It was an Intifada not only against, or an uprising not only against the Israeli occupation, but also the Palestinian Authority. And we all knew that until the Palestinian Authority contained these uprisings and turned them into militant uprisings. And this is the moment that also how your participation is being neutralized. You can no longer resist unless you have a gun, and this is kind of a very unfortunate moment. And I think now Palestinians are coming back to reconsider these moments. And I'm not talking about here lighting candles and walking out in the street, which is like kind of the middle class bourgeois would go, like, just carry your candle, but it's really about how you can reconstruct or not allow all these forces. I mean, you talk about the Israeli state, the Israeli government, its kind of main agenda is how to destroy you and how to turn you into a killer. And your challenge is how you will not succeed me into turn me the killer that I was not intending to be. Unless you decide you are a serial killer, and then it's like your own business. But I don't think Palestinians are serial killers. And this is leads you, I think sometimes in Palestine, and I also see it with my students, we're always almost on the edge of these very hard questions. They are not only my questions. I mean, the way I speak now is the way we will speak in the classroom, the way we discuss. And it's amazing also to see the students, because this is the space when they have this kind of temporary moment, that feeling of power, before they are being crushed by life and the occupation. There's these 4 years, and this is the space of total freedom. It's so inspiring to be with these students, and actually I learn a lot from them. I know that deep inside, I know I don't have much to teach them, and I don't believe in this kind of concept that I can come and teach them anything. I think we all have certain knowledges that we are exchanging and we are sharing, and maybe the classroom is a kind of this temporarily safe space where we can share these ideas, and the discussions are fascinating. I also want to say something, because I know I'm here in Pakistan, but I want to say also this is a position of privilege, because when you move to whatever area you can reach, because this is how the occupation works. It classifies you, it divides you, and I think you here know this very well, and you're living the consequences of this division. And the sad thing in the space of Palestine, it is a very small space, so it is being divided and it's being forced on you. And in these years of 2000, and I remember hearing that when they wanted to build a wall, it was actually Ehud Barak. In 2000, I heard it in the radio, who was saying that his plan is to build a wall. And my first reaction was like, no, this is a joke. This will never happen. But actually it happens. You know, the joke in Palestine says that, you know, the wall is being built on stages, like first stage, second stage, third stage. And they say, the Palestinians, the joke that the last stage of building the wall, they're going to put a roof. So this is, and we said, don't joke, because they might have the idea.
Don't give them ideas. Exactly. I remember that in 2002, when we went, I went there for work. There were schools that had been, you know, that were functioning. The ones that were functioning, that were fine, that had equipment, that had desks and chairs and textbooks, those were bombed. They were bulldozed. Anything and everything, as you were saying, the space was being constrained. Not only was a wall being built, but whatever was functioning was also being eroded. And it is quite something amazing. Like I said, Palestine is the metaphor. It's the metaphor and it's the framework for resistance. But we want to talk about your literature, and you wanted us to focus on your literature. Would you like to read to us from your short story? But I think Aamer wants to ask you something.
I particularly wanted to read the story about the sea because it will be very relevant to a Karachi audience. They'll probably see the visuals of it very clearly.
Yeah, and I want to add on this, like, you know, all this political reality and social and economic reality, it also becomes your teacher in how you can write. I mean, we're not talking about politics, but living in that. And for me, it was a question, like many also artists and writers, is what is the outcome of that? And I think there's a text that I would like to share with you today on the advice of Aamer. Okay. It will be easier to read it from here. So the title of the story is "The Sea is Muhammad al-Khatib's." But who is Muhammad al-Khatib? We know he is a young man, 20 years old, from Al-Khalil, and he wanted to go to the sea with his friends. We can then assume that he deliberated at length over the question how to get there. We can imagine, under the present circumstances, two possibilities of a sea that Muhammad al-Khatib can visit. The first possibility is the Sea of Gaza. But as its name quite literally indicates, the Sea of Gaza can only be accessed at the moment by whoever finds themselves there. So how can Muhammad al-Khatib get there? He first needs to reach Allenby Bridge in order to cross the Israeli-controlled border to Jordan, and so does his friends, one of whom is denied entry to Jordan by the Israeli intelligence, then head to Amman airport, and from there to Cairo airport. But before that, Muhammad al-Khatib needs to obtain a visa to enter Egypt, which is very difficult to get. But he can try nonetheless, and he gets it. And so do his friends, except for one who is on the Egyptian intelligence list. From Cairo, he heads to Al Arish, except for his friend who is denied entry to Egypt despite having a visa, since he was unfriendly to security services. From there, he has to reach Rafah, where he will find the crossing closed and will be ordered to return back to where he came from. But then he might find someone to bring him to Gaza through the tunnels, and from there to the sea. Something that has become more and more difficult to do these days, since the Egyptian authorities waged their US and Israeli-supported war against tunnels leading to Gaza. And so, after 3 days traveling, Muhammad al-Khatib will arrive without any of his friends at the Sea of Gaza on the 1st of September 2016 at around 5 p.m. and will have 1 hour before the night falls, and with it the Israeli naval artillery. But that hour with the sea is what counts. It counts 60 minutes or 3,600 seconds, an infinite time. Who did ever count up to the number 3,000, except for the waves of the sea. The second possibility is the Sea of Jaffa. And to get there, we can imagine under the present circumstances two possibilities. The first possibility is that Muhammad al-Khatib's father, or his uncle, or his cousin, or a close friend of one of these, or a close friend of an acquaintance of theirs, got a connection to someone who has a high position at one of the Palestinian Authority offices, or is an informer of the lowest degree who is providing the Israeli intelligence with information. That connection got Muhammad al-Khatib a permit to enter Israeli territories, except for Area D, from 7 a.m. until 7 p.m., which allows him to visit the sea. What about his friends? Well, they are his friends, and they too got a permit, except for one who is on the Palestinian intelligence list. That day, the 1st of September 2016, they will all start early and be the first to stand at the Bethlehem checkpoint. They are delayed a bit, and one is turned back for no reason, but at around 5, after having been stopped here, searched there, with one arrested here, and another one arrested there, Muhammad al-Khatib will arrive at the Sea of Jaffa. A name which is not quite literal, but metaphorical, since Jaffa is many kilometers away. He has 1 full hour, leaving 1 hour for the road before his permit expires. But that hour with the sea is what counts. It counts 60 minutes, or 3,600 seconds, an infinite time. Who did ever count up to the number 3,600 except for the waves of the sea? The second possibility is that Muhammad al-Khatib's father died, and so did his uncle, his cousin, their close friend, and the acquaintance of a close friend with a connection to someone who has a high position at one of the Palestinian Authority offices, or had been an informer of the lowest degree that provides the Israeli intelligence with information, who also died a while ago. But not the son of his neighbors, who needed none of these connections to reach inside. He works there without a permit, and he knows how to get there without a permit. Muhammad al-Khatib spends all night with the son of his neighbors in order to learn the illegal route that will allow him to get to the sea. And we can imagine, under the present circumstances, two possibilities of an illegal route. The first possibility is to drive in a car with a yellow number plate. Muhammad al-Khatib has a friend with such a car and a desire to go to the sea. He leaves early in the morning with his friends, except for one, as there is not enough place in the car, from Al-Khalil to Wadi al-Nar, or the Fire Valley Way, until they reach Beit Jala, except for one who gets carsick due to the many turns and curves for which Wadi al-Nar is known. They pull out the sunglasses and kippas and head to the tunnel checkpoint just as the rush hour hits, with the settlers of the south on the road heading for work in Jerusalem. And since the soldiers don't want to disturb any of the settlers or delay them, the car passes. Alas, halfway to the sea, the car gets hot, and after a couple of hours trying to cool it but failing, the friend driving and another one stay behind with it, and Muhammad al-Khatib rides buses to the sea. He arrives at around 5 p.m. on the 1st of September 2016, and he has 1 full hour before he needs to ride the buses back to Al-Khalil during the rush hour, when his chances to pass unnoticed are higher. But that hour with the sea is what counts. It counts 60 minutes, or 3,600 seconds, an infinite time. Who did ever count up to 3,600 except for the waves of the sea? The second possibility is not to find a friend who has a car with a yellow number plate in the entire area of Al-Khalil, so that Muhammad al-Khatib with his friends have to use the on-foot illegal route to get to the sea. He prepares himself, along with his friends, to leave before the dawn rises. he heads to the south rather than the north to the area of Al-Ramadin. There, between the hills, passes the route of the wall, still incomplete, in the form of wired fences. They get out of the stolen car they rented and run to the fence. They run and run, all reaching it except for one friend who loses a shoe as he runs and goes back to look for it. Then, as they jump off the fence, another friend tears his jeans all the way from his thigh to his bottom, with blood gushing out, and he is left behind. Muhammad al-Khatib cannot be delayed, otherwise he will be caught. So he keeps running until he reaches the small white bus with a driver from Rahat waiting with doors wide open. And once Muhammad al-Khatib enters, he leaves the scene with full speed. But the price is high, and Muhammad al-Khatib has money only for the first third of the way. With no money left, he hitchhikes to the sea, where he arrives at around 5 p.m. on the 1st of September 2016, and he has 1 full hour before he needs to hitchhike back to Al-Khalil. But that hour with the sea is what counts. It counts 60 minutes, or 3,600 seconds, an infinite time. Who did ever count up to the number 3,600 except for the waves of the sea? And there he is standing before the sea, where he may finally shout out loud, "This sea is mine." And we can imagine, under the present circumstances, 2 possibilities for a response from the sea. The first possibility is that the sea, upon hearing Muhammad al-Khatib's shouts in Arabic, obviously, and glimpsing in his raised hands as he runs towards it what may resemble a knife, it panics. The sea thinks Muhammad al-Khatib wants to stab it. The news of young men from Al-Khalil who had been suspected of planning knife attacks are too many for the sea to be cool about it. The sea calls the police to inform it about this shouting and running. But prior to the police arrival, and as time is still running, as is Muhammad al-Khatib, the sea jumps to neutralize him and pulls him to the ground, then drags him inside to contain his anger. But misfortune happens in such circumstances, and Muhammad al-Khatib dies in the process. The second possibility is that the sea, upon hearing Muhammad al-Khatib's shouts, in Arabic obviously, opens his heart. Since this is the Sea of Jaffa and it has not heard Arabic at this spot for a long time, and maybe it glimpses in the raised hands of Muhammad al-Khatib as he runs towards it, the hug he intends to give it. Like a lover's ear and eye, the sea does not confuse what its beloved says for the opposite. But like in love, once one claims another is theirs, the other may claim the same. As the sea hears Muhammad al-Khatib's shouts, "This sea is mine," it calls back, "You are mine." And the sea does not let go of Muhammad al-Khatib ever again. Thank you.
How do you say "the sea is mine" in Arabic?
Well, actually, the title of this short story is taken from a line by Mahmoud Darwish, where he says, "The sea is mine, هذا البحر لي."
Say it again.
هذا البحر لي. هذا البحر لي.
Tell us how to say.
هذا البحر لي.
هذا البحر لي.
Can you tell us something about the power of mother tongue? Because you work within it and outside it. What is it about the mother tongue that holds you so completely? And do you think this is a force of resistance in Palestine, having their own dialect of Arabic, their own version of Arabic, and a connection to the wider Arabic-speaking world?
I mean, this is something I will also speak about later. Arabic is not being saved, the oppression and an attack on it as a language. Nothing is saved under colonialism. And I think here people know very well how languages, they become suppressed, where one cannot speak the language they feel the closest to, or intimacy. This is also appears with nationalism. And I think, all the bad things that happens with nationalism, and especially nationalism that is being adopted after colonialism, because sometimes it tends to be reactionary in its adopting this kind of European model of the nation state where one language should rule. But luckily in the Arabic there is this space of allowing the classical to coexist with the dialect. I mean, classical Arabic is not Latin. It's not that people cannot understand, because we learn it from very young age. We hear cartoon in classical Arabic, and it's funny, and we think it's funny. It's like a light thing. But of course, with the occupation of Palestine, especially the parts of the historic Palestine, Arabic is being truly attacked. And sometimes, although you try to resist, you cannot the whole time resist. I mean, sometimes you resist certain things, sometimes you forget, because also we're humans, we have our own limits, and actually there you are faced with your own limits. So this kind of trying to use language as a form of resistance is not, I don't think it's so much conscious. I mean, for me, I also don't want to use language as a weapon. I don't accept this approach towards language. It's something, it should be very intimate, something that we feel the openness that sometimes life itself is lacking. And I also maybe, I'm there with Arabic because I grew up loving this language. I normally don't love so many things, I mean, or maybe I love too many things, but I love language quite a lot, Arabic language, because it has so many possibilities. And I also appreciate this movement in time that it allows, where you can read some poems that are written in the 5th century, and something that is being written as a shopping list and laid on your table. So there's something, this kind of movement which is very essential. And I think such languages they allow, but they don't constrict you, because it's you can choose it. There's not this kind of enforcement on the language.
It's also it's a local and regional language as well as a world language. So I think that immediately, even when you're not thinking of audience, it gives you a great audience. But would you like to tell us something about your very new novel? Because it's just reaching most of us all over the world. So something about the inspiration behind that and what you feel you've achieved with it.
Yeah, actually writing that novel was a real pain, because it took 12 years to write. It's a small novel. It's not like if it's 12 years, it's going to be big. I think in this 12 years, I just shortened it even more. It could have been longer before. But for me, it was also, again, related to language and how the powerless would be able to articulate when they are forced to be articulating certain things. I mean, yesterday, Uzma Aslam Khan, who was researching archives and finding those archives, I think in the case of Palestine, for her novel, in the case of Palestine, we don't have access to archives. I mean, this novel tries to reach an archive, and it shows the process of trying to reach an archive where you cannot actually have this access. So what can you find outside the space of the archive? And for me, sometimes also I have this ambiguous relation to archives, or not so ambiguous, I just don't like them maybe. Because for me, it's also a choice of the power, what you include and what you exclude. And for me, I'm really interested in things that are excluded and silenced and marginalized than things which are included. So the novel goes to investigate an incident of somebody whose voice will never be heard. And there's no traces of the voice. So for me, the main question is how can language, which is something that I trust so much, can also betray me and others at certain times. It's kind of a strange feeling. I know language doesn't do that. I know that humans do that. But still, I wanted to know the limits of the language itself. And it's very strange, because I wrote this novel, I started writing this novel actually when I went to London to study, and I continued while I was in Germany when I moved to Germany. And this kind of also isolation, linguistic isolation. I mean, the languages there are not the languages that you feel you can relate to them beyond the functional. And when you want to write something beyond the functional and you don't want to use language, but you want to live language, it was a challenge because it was also suddenly a marginalized language in the soundscape and hearing it. And so for me, it's also an exercise or an investigation of how this language disappears. And you're only left with the silence. You practice it silently while writing. And for me, this was also maybe a connection to the silencing of the narrative of the who ends up like a minor character in the novel.
Aamer, this reminds me about what you were saying earlier in your session about language and how you wrote in English and then now you're writing in Urdu. And that experience of accessing, expression through Urdu now, which is, somehow you feel it deeper. And here Adania is saying that, you seem to be saying that language itself becomes, a certain language becomes a limitation if it's not, you're not hearing it all around you and you're writing in it, but in a context where you aren't getting any, it's not in your ears and all around you.
Then you're evoking something that's at a distance. Yeah, I think that's very powerful.
But although it's also important. It's a different experience with language. I mean, when you live up in a place that the language in which you write is not the language which is the dominant language, it is an interesting relation that you uncover. It's almost like a secret love relation that becomes, yeah.
I was wondering if we should open this up for a few questions from the audience.
Yes, just as we've all been talking amongst ourselves, you can join in and start asking questions.
Yes. And I'll also let you know that we have two of Adania's novels available at the Pioneer Books
Is it at the Pioneer
Book House.
Okay.
It wasn't a capture by me. It was very graciously offered by Adania, and they're sitting at the Pioneer Book House stall, and you can go and get them after the session, and she'll be there to sign them for you. So let's
and
open
here,
up.
I actually want to thank somebody important who was able to bring the books, is Tarek, but I don't think he's around, but I just would like to thank him. So he's somewhere in Karachi.
Adania, I've done, as you know, I've been into two of those zones and several of the barriers, so I know exactly what you're talking about. And I saw the sea in Haifa and Akko, but not in Jaffa. Yeah, so I know the sea you're talking about as well, but we weren't allowed to go to Gaza. So I think that experience will be quite
I saw the sea in Gaza.
Yeah,
and I'm ashamed, very ashamed to say this, that in 2002, when I was in Gaza, I couldn't wait to leave. I just was counting the hour, the 60 minutes, the 60 seconds, 60 minutes, then the 60 seconds to get out, because it was so oppressive. It was like being imprisoned, and there was a wall going up, and the checkpoint, and getting into Gaza and getting out of Gaza was like going into a jail and coming out of a jail. And this is how 1.2 million people are living, So, but I did see the sea. I saw the sea.
Yeah, but I should add, it's actually fun to be in Gaza. The people of Gaza are very funny. Palestinians are not always funny, but the funny is when they get funny, they are really in Gaza. I mean, I'm biased. I think it's a fun place you all should visit. You can close your eyes, don't look at the checkpoints, look at your watch, your shoes, somebody else's shoes, and you will pass this experience. But it's a great place.
But they're hilarious. I mean, Palestinians are hilarious, and I've spent time with Adania and her family, her sisters, and I don't think we were lugubrious at all. We were talking about serious things like new films from the Arab world, but it was always with a laugh. So enjoy Adania's conversation as well. Don't only ask her very solemn questions. Yeah.
Does somebody have a microphone that we can use? There's a question. Okay, so there's a question over here, and then there's a question over there.
Hello. What particular obligations do you feel, other than the political ones, for creating literature for the nation without a state?
You have to speak a little bit louder. A little bit louder.
Okay. Do you feel any particular obligations for writing and creating literature for a nation without a state, other than the political ones?
I need to be clear. I never feel a political obligation when I write. This is what I'm trying to describe is everything until the moment I write. It's not what I write, what comes inside. So it's like, as if we are sitting here, so there's the workers who laid the chairs and put the cloth, and somebody did the flowers. It's everything that we didn't see, but suddenly we are in this space. And so for me, it's always interesting what forms, what literary form, and especially I'm interested in the form, because I don't like narrative structure. I don't like the stories that they have a beginning and middle at the end, because for me this is the biggest farce. And I experience it because whenever you have this order, you have this kind of narrative presented, there's so much things are absent, and from that position, the absence is not a coincidence. It's a question of power. So for me, the experience in Palestine becomes not from a position of a national position or an aspiration to a nation state, but for me, Palestine becomes a state of being. It's almost like a teacher in literature, in experimental literature. Because it constantly, your life experience is always pushed to an edge that makes you careful of all things that are taken for granted, including ideas or following ideas that they are just being forced on you. You become almost like paranoid or careful that you don't want anything being forced on you. There's so much violence in you. And then this is like, it becomes a question of literature. Which kind of literature I would be able to write if I'm not subject to all these forces? It can be an idealistic question, because what can we do away of that? But I think this experience had allowed me so much to experiment in the form. And for me, really, like, writing is a game. It's playing. So there's no message I want to put. I actually hate messages. And as somebody wants to give me a message, I say, thank you, I don't want your message. And the idea to pass on a message, a post person, a postman or a postwoman, they're allowed to pass the message, but that's it, because their role is defined. I think as a writer, it's not my role to pass on a message, but it's more to open a space that actually allows you to exist. Because I know how literature was important for me as a human being. It actually taught me how to live and how to continue living. In the time of 2000, where Maniza was, it was a very hard time. But I know there was one book that saved me, which is the book by Primo Levi, the Saved and the Drowned, because you always feel a sense of betrayal. But you see, really, literature, this is fascinating about literature, what it can do. It can carry you in a way that nothing else. Maybe it's all art where it's important. So for me, I don't know what is there, but I know how literature has affected me, and this kind of space that it opens up. So I'm interested in this space that it opens up. And not what it carries there.
Well, circular phenomenologies carry messages within them that are for the reader to decode, I think. So, do we have another?
Yeah, two parts. One, I would imagine, correct me if I'm wrong, but I would imagine that a Palestinian would understand what is happening with the fascist government in India and the annexation of Kashmir. Is that true? We don't hear much out of that part of the world. And secondly, I'm curious about your relationship with Germany, because I understand you live extensively there. You are, I think, sponsored by the Goethe Institute. And the narrative of which is owned by the German Foreign Office. And the official narrative from Germany is exceptionally biased towards the occupier.
Biased towards?
And you, of course, you know, there's the story of, and in personal life also, you meet Germans and there's the low self-esteem they feel because of the Holocaust, etc. So how do you engage? Is it an issue? How do you engage with Germany, Goethe Institute, and that sort of concept when the official narrative is so pro-occupation, pro-occupier? And the second one was about Kashmir. Thank you.
Yes, of course. I mean, we're aware of the rising fascistic movements in India and unfortunately in many parts of the world. But there's also a part that I also criticize in the work of Palestinian intellectuals and writers. I think sometimes we are too much obsessed with our own troubles. And sometimes I think, I mean, is it like, are we obsessed or are we actually being cut from things? Sometimes movement in place and encounters are quite enriching. And I said, I'm in a position of a privileged person. I can come here, I can go to India and meet all these people, intellectuals who are opposing Modi and fighting in the streets. And this is actually where I was introduced to Pakistani literature with people who are, you know, they're completely, there are still people against partition and in a vision of something that is not, a life that is not, has not been designed by the colonialists or imperial power. But yes, there is a limitation. So for me, I can have this experience, I can travel and can meet, and there's an effect of these encounters that they are not limited to what you get in the news. But of course, the news, they would cover things, what's happening. I would say Palestinians are tired. They are really exhausted. Despite how much you try, you become so much narrow-minded, so much, people even don't think about people in other cities in Palestine. Nobody in Ramallah would think about the people in Gaza, or the people in Gaza would not think about the people in Rafah. So it's like almost every neighborhood is so much contained, and this is a practice. This is a way of division that has been implemented. It's not a coincidence. There's a whole strategy of fragmenting and fragmentation. As for being in Germany, I mean, yes, the official discourse is like that. And it's quite unfortunate that the discourse tries actually to not see the victimizations of others today. I mean, the horrific crimes of the Nazis, they're something should be always present, but it should not eclipse as well our empathy to other causes. And this is what I'm also saying about Palestinians. Our suffering should not eclipse the suffering of others. And it's not a race. And I really hate it when people start to race like, my pain is more than your pain. It's like, you know, like my car is bigger than your car, and we go on about that. It is, sometimes actually you can suffer pain on a level that in personal relations, that it's more felt and more experienced. You experience it in a certain way that also can allow you to understand the pains of others. It should not be used this kind, and I think this method of closing because you're a victim, it's really defeating or actually making you limited as those who are oppressing you want you to be. And I see it in Palestine. We are being limited, and this is a way of how we are being cut, and it works, and it can succeed. As for and for the official discourse, I mean, I'm definitely not for the discourse, the German discourse. Nor I hardly find any government I can be supportive of its discourse, and not the Palestinian Authority, and definitely, you know, the Israeli government or the American. So I think it's important, and here we go back to Edward Said, the importance of our role as writers, artists, intellectuals, to be against the powerful. Because there it is clear how power works, and our ability not to be also against, but to say the truth, to speak the truth to power, which is a phrase that Edward Said has articulated, and it's very important. And luckily, it's not like a unified discourse. If the German government speaks that way, then everybody, and there's this kind of space of independence. People think differently, sometimes more to the left, sometimes more to the right, but in that space, you navigate and you speak and you exchange. And I don't want, to go and force myself in a place that doesn't want to hear me. I don't do it also in personal life. If people are curious and would like to know, you can share. Although your ability to share is also limited and governed by that which you cannot speak about. And there's a lot you cannot speak about.
And you're also saying that you don't want victimhood to make people, the chosen people, a sense of being chosen just to suffer. Because that brings us to other myths and mythologies, which I think are very potent. Was there another question? Do we have time for about 2 more? Any questions or comments? Yes, please go. You need the mic again.
I think I know the answer, and I would share your answer, but I just wanted to ask you on the record, is your voice mitigated, or does it lose some of its power when you take official government funding, such as through the Goethe Institute, for example?
Yeah, I mean, it's always a question that one would ask themselves, and I'm not with the theory of contamination. And we spoke about that. If you take money from somebody and they have not killed, and there's a, maybe here, like also for what John Stuart Mill defines as harm. When there's an actual harm and there's a body that is supported and works within a structure that supports harm, I wouldn't take the money. And I've been invited to the US by the Foreign Office, and of course, I said no. I don't want that, and I will never want that. So it is a question, what? There's not this, it's like either that or that. And also sometimes with the people. And what kind of discourse? And one should be careful. I would not go also with a right-wing institution, and there are. And in terms of right-wing, not only it's politics to Palestine, but also in terms of neoliberalism. And there's you always receive these invitations, but I always investigate where's the money coming from. Like now I also received an invitation to Istanbul, but there, after the investigation, I know this is the municipality that is supported by the AKP, the Erdogan party, which has suppressed, arrested, and harassed writers, academics, etc., and also the Kurdish, Turkish part of the population. So on these questions, you have to think. And I think this process of thinking, I don't always say no immediately. I explain the whole time. So I really bore them, and I bore myself because it takes me a lot of time. Because I think this is important to say why not, and not just to say no or no, I'm busy. Because some people decide to be more kind of pragmatic and say, no, I'm busy this time. No, I'm not busy. Actually, I have time, but I don't want to go to your festival because your festival is kind of giving a good, kind of this beautiful face to the practices of the party in the government. And I think we can decide upon this. I mean, I'm not a big fan of Goethe. I like Werther's. I mean, I read him. I'm not a fan of East-West Divan. But it's okay. But he didn't do anything bad,
But most cultural institutes in Europe are not actually organs of the government, and certainly writers are not sent abroad to promote the agenda of any prevalent party. Otherwise, so many writers wouldn't travel around as guests of the Alliance Française or the British Council or the Goethe Institute. And I think they are quite committed to multiculturalism and pluralism.
And you know, it's not only when they don't, they're not using to promote them directly, but sometimes your presence as if it justifies. And I know Israeli writers, for instance, the Israeli government does not support them to travel. So there are certain Israeli writers, they travel around the world, and you know that they are being supported by the office, the Foreign Office, the Israeli Foreign Office. Yeah. And you know, they are going there to present the nice, cultured face of the Israeli government. That they have mistakes, they don't mistake the Palestinian, we do, but you know, we can all solve it through a dialogue. Sorry, no, I want actually a monologue. I don't want you a dialogue, you know. The dialogue so far is go there, give me your ID, okay, sir, this is the only dialogue now. So I would like, no, actually, there's a discourse that need to be put, and it's my turn, and I don't want to be limited and defined by your kind of ideology on how to do things, and this is a problem. So I think there's a difference. Sometimes they use you, even you try not to speak about something, and you're not going to say, I'm supporting Netanyahu, but they are using you. And I think it's also important.
I think the BDS is very clear about what we should and shouldn't boycott. In fact, they tell you that many, many institutions, you have to look for that little logo that says, supported by the tourist office, the various ways the Israeli government supports people, artists, to go abroad. And some of them are quite seemingly invisible to an innocent person. And the BDS is very clear about that. So they don't, in fact, ask you to stand against independent Israeli academics or writers.
And this also precedes the BDS, because you know, sometimes also with the BDS I have certain problems, because as if it's like becomes a collective voice. No, I can decide and I can see things, and also, you know, I would not agree, because I know these like Yitzhak Laor, he's a great Israeli poet, that he is being strangled by the Israeli government. And this is, you see, like, okay, this is kind of solidarity. I know his struggle is different than mine, and he doesn't ask for my support, but I can see that it is actually the Israelis who are boycotting. They are boycotting writers. So it's not like the Palestinians have the power not to speak to. I mean, nobody hears us. So it's not like, and I think it's very important to articulate this kind of position of power in these kind of processes.
I think we have a question right here, the lady in the...
Well, it's partly question and partly comment. I'm very pleased. It was my privilege to listen to your chapter that you read out from your book, The Sea is Mine. For myself, I wasn't aware that there are so many walls between the 1.2 million Palestinians. I wouldn't have known unless I had heard you. And some credit goes to the Goethe Institute, which enabled you to write it and to read it out to us. But in spite of it being a monologue, don't you think that your writing instinctively reflects a political state and political scenario that the Palestinians are going to go through? And I'm quite sure you've very successfully managed to conduct it and convey it certainly to the population in Pakistan. So, although you don't want to indulge in politics, but instinctively it comes out in the expression of your work, literary work, which if people read, are able to formulate a view for themselves.
Yeah, you're certainly right. It's not a refusal that I don't want to indulge in politics, and my apologies if this what came through. Actually, no. What I'm saying that politics is not limited to an act of an announcement. Politics goes in every corner of your life. In the case of Palestine, it's, as I was speaking yesterday also to a friend, it goes in the time when you take a shower, or when you do your washing. And this is politics. I mean, the second novel here that is called We Are Equally Far From Love, which I wrote exactly in the horrific years that I witnessed as a young woman in the early 2000s until 2004. And it's about the inability to love, about the failure of love. And for me, in a way, if you want to define it, this is a political novel. Although it talks about couples, also only takes about the breakup of relations between a couple or inside a family or the absence of love. But in a sense, this is for me a political novel of the destruction of the self, the inability to love. And I think we really are suffering that in Palestine. It comes out of lack of trust. So this is an investigation. It's not like you're going with words that you did not have a relation with. It's not like you borrowed a discourse from somebody else. But it is a reflection on our being in conditions of oppression.
I think we're done. Would you like to wrap up, Maniza? I began.
I think we really wanted to give you the maximum time possible to speak, Adania. I want to thank you very much. I wanted to steer us towards politics as much as possible, but the word politics is not the right word. I did want us to talk more about the wall that is not just the wall. There isn't one wall, but it's walls around each and every town, and the walls and the chains and locks on everybody's mouth. And despite that, writers and poets and artists are rising somehow above that wall and those walls and flying to be able to see the sea and to claim the sea. And there is so much about Palestine that resonates with our condition, not only in Pakistan, not only in Sindh, not only in Karachi, but right now it seems that a large part of the world has become very much in the literal and the figurative sense, Palestine, because there is surveillance, there is censorship, there is a reduction of public space, there is land grabbing going on at a massive scale, and there is targeted killing going on. So whether you want it or not, we are in solidarity with you.
Thank you. Thank you, Shukriya.
Thank you very, very much, Adania. I hope you'll keep coming back to us.